Hello and welcome to the Crate and Crowbar, a podcast that's about PC gaming mostly. It's episode 366 and the date is the 22nd of April and the year is 2021. My name's Tom Senior. I'm joined today by Marsh Davis.
Hello.
And Alex Wiltshire.
Hello.
And welcome to the No News Zone section of the No News. Is there any news you want to talk about at all?
There is something I wanted to say.
Ooh.
I wanted to say some news. Skin
Say
deep.
it.
Skin deep. Skin deep.
Oh, yeah.
Skin deep. Brendan Chung's game, which he's been working on for quite a while now, actually. Probably 3 years, 4 years. He showed a trailer of it in the week. I mean, it's Annapurna, isn't it? That's a...
Yeah, they picked it up. I don't
yeah,
think it was
publishing.
always slated to be an Annapurna published thing, but I think that's what's accompanied the new trailer. Is the announcement that it's being published by them.
And I mean, he's been showing the game off, pretty much continually as he's been developing it. I think every week he does a kind of streams development. So kind of, I don't think there's any surprises in it other than just the delight of a Brendan Chung production with all of the little editing touches that he does. So, and kind of just the way he uses UI and stuff. So it's just been lovely just to see this really short little kind of segment of a game that I'm really excited about because I just love all of his games for, their invention and wit and that. And it's also got a crew of cats on a spaceship. And one of them is called Mr. Tumbles or something like that. And that's nice.
So the pitch is like Die Hard in space, from what I understand. But is it like a fairly systemic, free-formy stealth thing where you're sneaking through vents and sneezing and setting off like chain reactions? Because it seems to simulate some stuff like having feet cut on broken glass and things like this. Or is it going along the more sort of like cinematic linear direction of 30 Flights of Loving, for example, which was like a short form, incredibly nicely edited spy thriller, basically.
Yeah, so there's always been there's a tension in Quadrilateral Cowboy between those two influences. I felt because that was actually said to be like it's quite a systems game in a way. Like it did ultimately boil down to use X tool on Y, but it felt more like it looked like this game is going to be closer to Quadrilateral than it's going to be to 30 Flights, I think. But that's just purely based on what it looks like. I have no greater insight beyond the trailer and what I've seen of it so far.
Yeah, I mean, having sort of said in the preamble that we've seen the game, quite a lot of the game because he's been streaming it. I also have no idea.
Brilliant. There you go.
We're good at this, aren't we?
I'm a game journalist.
I never got into Quadrilateral Cowboy. I have to say it was in that spate of indie games desperate to tell you that coding was fun. And I'm afraid I remain totally unconvinced that it is even remotely fun. I kind of resent the games that have tried to get me to learn coding. So I didn't get into that. But I really loved all of Brendan Chung's other output. I think they're fabulous games. So I'm excited about that. I love like the systemic, stealthy stuff. Sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah,
I think the Quadrilateral was it was more systemic than it was about coding. It is, in the same way that systemic games are the product of things working together, and you become part of that equation and balance the two sides in the way that will solve it in the way that you need to. I think that's its take on a coding thing. I think that the coding thing was more of an aesthetic than an actual part of gameplay, I think.
Yeah.
I suppose there were a few bits actually on there, but yeah, it was more about problem solving, really.
Yeah, it was about, in its best levels, it sort of veered off about 2/3 of the way through, did some other weird stuff. But the actual sort of coding stuff was more about creating the perfect heist, perfect 20 seconds of heist, where as you move through the environment, you've coded everything to turn off at precisely the right amount of time. So the laser grid goes down just as you're falling through it and then reactivates. And then, you've got 10 seconds to unlock a safe before you can get back out through a door that you've also programmed to unlock 20 seconds later. And when everything kind of comes together, you get that kind of Mission Impossible feel. And that combined with that lovely blendo aesthetic and sort of sense of humor and just a kind of weird, it's just really anachronistic, I think, like the idea that you can sort of take out a hacking deck, but also when you go back to your lab, it's just full of dusty old books and bits of old hard drives and stuff. It's just, he's just got such a great imagination.
Yeah. I love the bit in the Skin Deep trailer where the character goes up to this great bulbous kind of robot-y thing and then comes in behind it, and it's a mech that you get inside, and it's just sort of, it hits all of the mech pilot notes, but with this very Blendo, very Brendan kind of delight in the ridiculousness of such a thing, of such an act, kind of holding these two sort of joysticks thing, and kind of with all the different bits of the screen kind of coming online
in different angles, which is Titanfall. So it's like literally every mech game you've ever seen is just
but that's what I love about, like, his just fascination for the kind of like the little sort of tiny details of games, some of which are kind of weird and janky, and some of which just are parts of games but just were never really questioned, and now they're just what we assume, and they're therefore invisible to us. He's really good at pointing them out and going, yeah, look at that, that's crazy if you think about it. Look what we're doing. What are we all doing? But it's good, isn't it? Yeah, good. I feel proud.
Those games always make me smile. I might go back and play 30 Flights for the 10th time. Lovely. Is there any other news?
That is all the news.
I've used up all my excitement for news by being excited about a game that I don't know much about. So with that in mind, I wonder what you've been playing, Alex.
Me? I've been playing two things quite a lot. I'll talk about the newer one first. So on April Fool's Day, a very small team of kind of enthusiasts released Prime 2D, which is a 2D sort of vision of a Metroid Prime game. The kind of totally fan made, and therefore liable to be shut down by Nintendo any second. I believe it is still up, remarkably, given that it uses, if not the actual kind of samples from Metroid Prime, which is the GameCube era series of 3D Metroid games, these first-person games, which I love dearly. But this is a 2D version of it, which takes very much the feel of those games and translates them to the old, the where Metroid came from, which I think it's incredibly successful about it. So in Metroid fashion, it opens with you coming down in your ship onto an alien planet, which is with trees and pools of water and those sorts of things, all in 2D, pixelated. And you come sort of zoom out of the, rise out to the top of the ship in the way that you have done over years and years and many, many games. And then you're controlling Samus, the main character, with WASD. And then you're aiming with the mouse, which is a really good control scheme for Metroid Prime, because Metroid Prime's kind of thing is this sort of is that it's first person, and therefore you look and interact. You interact with the things you look at. In that game, there's lots of scanning, so you're exploring the environments as much as you're just shooting all the monsters, which constantly respawn. Finding details, discovering the story through fundamentally kind of little kind of notes that you found in the environment. But it's a really sort of cool game for me, because the environments are detailed and kind of, there are ruins and weird artifacts, but there are also bodies of these sort of spacefaring space pirates, I think they're called, kind of lying around, who have subsequently come to the planet, and you're uncovering their story as you're exploring the areas. so scanning and finding out their stories through scanning is part of that. And in this one, you're pointing at with the mouse to things, but also using that very same interface to shoot at stuff. So it works precisely the same in the same sort of way as the first person original game does. And therefore, with all the sound effects in there, it just feels very, very authentic, really. It's very short demo. I finished in like half an hour or less. But there are some really lovely effects in it. I understand that the engine was actually made by, if not a member of the 4 or 5 people who made it, but one of their kind of group. So it's a home built engine called the Net Mission engine. The download is minute as well. Everything sort of flows and moves really smoothly, and it has these really nice effects where in classic sort of Metroid Prime fashion, at one point you discover this area where there's obviously some sort of shrine for the people who built all the artifacts that you find in this area, with all these statues, and you're walking through and as you walk past, it's got this amazing sort of almost 3D look to it. It's really strange. Don't know how it's made it, because I'm pretty sure that every asset is fully 2D. It's a mixture of parallax and some other stuff. I don't know. It's really effective though, and that combined with the fact that you can jump around and climb up on things, and it has that same sense of agility that even with it's the start of the game, so you're not very powered up yet. With that agility, it just pairs very well with it. It's just good, and I really recommend anyone to grab it.
Yeah,
it's called Prime 2D before Nintendo inevitably close it down.
Yeah, remind me to do that in the break. So I would download
I've got
it before it goes. So have they? This is probably a stupid question, but have they said why they've done this?
I was going to ask the same thing.
They're longer. I mean, it came out of just somebody. It's been going since I think 2017, and I think that they just love Metroid Prime, and someone idly said, "Hey, let's make a 2D version of it," and that's where it came from. They say that they're entirely ready to be closed down and to actually then switch all of the assets to fresh ones, so the game can continue in the form that it is, but with a new story, new graphics, new whatever. So actually they're
so
they're not.
Actually, quite a marketing stunt in a way.
Yeah, it's not a bad one.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm actually quite sort of hopeful, but they do warn very, very clearly that that it's taken them 3 years to get to this point. No, hang on, 2017, 4 years to get to this point. So don't hold your breath for any main game. But they're being realistic about in fact, the fact they're realistic about Nintendo's property, and also realistic about how long it takes to make stuff, actually fills me with quite a lot of hope that something does come of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, if nothing else, it's a great demonstration of their skills, and I'm sure they could use it as a pitch to publishers.
Definitely, yeah.
It sounds like it doesn't lose any of the atmosphere of the first-person games, and one of the things I remember very keenly about the first-person 3D Metroid games was that it made you very aware that you were inside this claustrophobic helmet all the time, and the way the heads-up display worked, and there was also kind of like grapple hooking around and hitting weak spots with your cannon. And is anything at all lost by the shift to 2D?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually. I mean, yes, like clearly you're not in the body. The UI, like the head-ups display, is kind of has the same fundamental idea to it, in the sense that sort of it's this sort of wraparound feel to it, and it's showing icons in that same way, but like it's not trying to say you're in a helmet looking at a view of yourself running from left to right, and therefore it doesn't have that immediacy. There is a boss fight at the end which is very much about hitting the right bit of it, but I wouldn't say it has quite the same puzzle solving feel that Metroid Prime Pure has, where you're kind of locking onto stuff and making very sort of specific decisions about what you're shooting at, with the assurance with the lock-on system that you'll hit that thing, with the right timing and whatever. Like, it doesn't have that sort of intentionality to it. It's much more of a 2D platformer. It's a platformer game. And I think that's necessary for that change in perspective. So therefore, it feels, in that sense, much more like the original games. But it has the same attention to sound effect, and and just the sense of being in a world that the originals have, with the necessary sense that it's more, in the way that platforms have to be the exact height for you to know that you can jump and hit it and get up to it, and that your jump will reach that height. I think that Metroid Prime, one of its great strengths was that feeling of being in an organic world, and that it wasn't all simply designed around the metrics of how far you could jump. There was much more of a sort of maybe you can try this, and this is a natural space, and obviously it's lost that as well.
Nice ball physics as well in the 3D games. That was such a fascinating move for Nintendo to make a first-person shooter that actually kind of wasn't in the traditional sense that it wasn't at all about like Twitch. It went out of its way to make it, as you say, a puzzle game rather than a game that's about like immediately hitting weak points with Twitch headshots and stuff like that. And even though your character is very mobile, it's within easily understood constraints. So like the grappling hook, like it was very clear about what you could grapple onto, where you'd end up, and it was really clear when you were rolling around as a ball, it would like ping you down, Sonic cut style, ping you down these chutes into different areas. I think it was just, those games were just so clever, and I'm surprised they haven't received it like a Switch remaster or something. Though another one is in development, I think. They just showed a logo a year ago or something.
Yeah. The eternally kind of hoped and waited for game. Yeah, no, it's, I played the I was halfway through the second Metroid Prime 2 on, because it came out on Wii U. No, Wii. And there's like on single disc as a trilogy set, which which is like, well, if you've got a Wii U, it's totally playable still. And it still works really well. And it really works on the Wii with a Wii remote and all that stuff as well. Oh, it's a good series. Such a good series. Oh, and the platforming feels so good as well. That floaty jump, but it's not floaty. It's just gives you a sense of assuredness, jumping through 3D space with a really limited view. And it somehow works. There's so much about that game. Oh, and just the way the view slightly looks downwards as you make a jump, giving you an awareness of where your feet are going to hit. Like, there's so many tiny subtleties to it that make it so good. Oh, what a series. I'm going to play it again now.
I love the upgrade sequences, when you actually got a new thing, just seeing that armor slot on and sort of see your armor change color and shine. It's just, quality stuff. Good. I did say at the start of this podcast, it's mostly about PC gaming. So sometimes we just talk about Nintendo for a bit. But yeah, so Marsh, what have you been playing?
I've been playing two things, but I've been really playing with one of those things. And it's not a game, it's a tool. It's the Metahuman creator that you guys talked a bit about last week, which is a tool released by Epic, which allows you to create just incredibly high fidelity human models. And it comes with all these sort of existing models of very believable looking humans that you can sort of blend between, and then you can shift the parameters.
I'm really excited. And I'm really excited about how disgusting that you could make a creature.
Well, this is the nub of my issue with it, actually, Alex. So you can sort of shift the parameters and you can tweak the geometry, and what you end up with will be like this sort of reasonably believable digital maquette that comes fully rigged for animation. It can be exported to nearly any 3D format and then into any engine you like. But right now, I would say it's actually more. I mean, this makes perfect sense if you think that of the business of it, but it's more, what they've produced is more demonstrative of the very powerful pipeline that they have, which then produces these incredibly high fidelity digihumans. but it's actually quite patchy, I think, in terms of the freedoms that it gives you within that to create humans, or particularly ugly humans, I would say, are sort of outside of its scope. So everything you create will be sort of reasonably believable at first glance, and but it's also quite restrictive in the sense that you can't. Just can't create the full range of human faces that actually exist in reality. So I think it's a very functional tool for producing without any further thought, sort of believable people. But if you're trying to use it as like a sculptural tool, where you're trying to produce something that you already have in mind, then it's actually not that good for that. In fact, I'd say it's not as good as a lot of character creators of even a previous generation, which may have been like lower fidelity, but they probably gave you like more choices. Part of it's down that there's just a limited range of, for example, like hair options, which are all like these static wigs that you can't really manipulate after you've dropped them on your model. So I imagine that'll expand. But there's actually no possibility for asymmetry yet, which is pretty essential to making a human face feel immediately believable. It's a pain in the ass for art assets, because I think most people like the fact that symmetry means you have to do half as much work. But there's also like strange interdependencies between the nodes that you sort of tug around to change the face's terrain. I tried to create myself, actually, and it turns out I'm just too ugly for this tool to be able to create. I'm just so woefully deformed that the digital realm is not ready for me. And it's...
I'd just like to point out that that isn't true. You do have a normal amount of asymmetry.
Well,
but yeah,
but I think it... I don't know if it's just all the starting points that they've used to generate these faces are of fairly beautiful people. But there's just weird stuff. Like, I try and pull up the bridge of my nose to give myself that the haughty hook-nosed look that I'm well known for. But it was sort of just like average out that action with the other features around it. So I'd end up just like slightly expanding my nose rather than pulling up the bridge of my nose. I couldn't recreate my weak, slack-jawed jawline or my pouchy face. I don't know. I guess this stuff will just continue to be developed, and it's and like it is astounding. Like the ability to kind of play with these pre-created models and have something that's fully animated from the off is incredible. But I'm kind of slightly surprised that the big unveiling didn't allow you to like create somebody with a big nose. Like Adrian Brody is right out. You could not create an Adam Driver with this.
And absolutely no Owen Wilson.
No, exactly. And I can see like they wouldn't want people just yoinking these faces out like they're made of plasticine, because that would be a bad advert for them, and it'd probably break the rigging that they've got. But I don't think your Brodies or your Drivers or your Wilsons are like that extreme facial forms that they should be beyond the realm of possibility.
Yeah, they do all right.
But for me, it's not quite what I want, because I wanted to use it as an art tool where I could sculpt faces from something that existed already, but essentially sculpt them to something I had in my head. But it seems better, like it's more designed for you to semi-accidentally generate plausible but very cinematic pretty boys. And it seems quite difficult to do a lot more than that. Yeah.
So maybe it's a good sort of blurry, out of focus in the background NPC face generator.
Yeah. Yeah. Although actually, sorry, there's one part of the tool which actually really diverges from this, and that's the teeth. Whereas, unlike everything else, you have the most amazing powers to create some of the worst, most horrendous teeth imaginable. And again, the controls, the tools are like somewhat out of your control. Like you can't individually determine which teeth are larger than others, but you can sort of like tweak these generalized sliders to misalign them, or wear them down to these horrid little stubs, or just simply kind of overcrowd the mouth until it looks like a really disused graveyard. Or you can draw back the gums horrifically and add loads of plaque. Anyways, it's fantastic. I've created a large number of incredibly beautiful people who then smile and make you want to be sick. So it's that's what I've been doing. I've also been playing something, but I will save that for later. What have you been playing, Tom?
I've been playing Diablo II, which is being remastered for release later this year, I believe. And there was an alpha test, which I participated in. I also played an awful lot of it when it was originally released with my friends on 56k modems that worked only about 40% of the time. And it's just interesting to go back to a game that spawned a genre of games. I can't think of another genre where everything that has followed its genesis has been so similar to the original thing.
Yeah.
In which, like, there's been so little experimentation with the action RPG formula, and the ones that really stand out are celebrated. Stuff like Titan Quest is good because you can dual class.
I remember when what game is it that introduced cats and dogs that would take your loot back for you?
Torchlight.
I remember that being such a big feature. Like
whoa,
what? You've got a cat and it can carry your fucking junk back for you, and
it'll sell it and return. I don't know if it skims a bit off the top for itself. It's so going back to Diablo 2 is a little bit sad, really, which was I was expected to be completely, utterly sucked into it and consumed by it, as I was originally, and as I often am by action RPGs. I've played loads of Diablo 3, for example. But you forget how boring it is to play a melee character in that game. Because you don't get many interesting skills as a melee character until like level 6, which is probably about, I don't know, you could probably get there in 40-45 minutes. Probably less if you know where you're going. And then the barbarian gets his leap, and that's quite fun. But apart from that, you really are just clicking on things, and then watching them fall over, but but with no like physics to it that you've come to expect from like a modern action RPG, where in Diablo 3, if you hit something and get a critical hit, it just like explodes all over the corridor, and there's a big satisfying noise, and the whole game engine is better able to sell the impact of the blows that you're swinging, and also Diablo 3 does a lot to make melee classes more interesting, teleportation attacks and that kind of stuff. But I was playing with the Amazon, and she starts out with a javelin, and the animation for hitting something with a javelin is so crap. It's so bad. It's literally just like she holds it over her right shoulder, and she just pokes, little poke. And you might get sorts of gems that make it poke a bit faster. And if you right click, you throw the javelin, and because of the way the kind of 2D sprites work, the javelin will appear to miss but actually hit, and then sometimes hit but actually, because of the dice roll, actually miss and not do any damage. And you just like, even though the graphical upgrades they've done are, I mean, I don't think they could have done a better job of what they intended to do with it, to be honest. When you could press a button to switch it back to its original graphics mode, and everything is just exactly in the right place, exactly in the same place. You can tell all the hitboxes are identical. They've kept everything in the game, including stuff like the stamina bar, which actually sprints around, which lots of players hate. They've just kept everything in, and is simply because I think the logic is essentially, if we don't change anything, they can't criticize us because this is this venerable object that has become is a really formative part of lots of people's gaming experiences, myself included. But I've realised after playing a load of it to do some sort of beginner's class guides for PC Gamer that I'm not gonna buy it. And I never thought I'd say that. So, it's like even the Sorceress, who is just such a fantastically fun class to play in Diablo 3, because you get all the lasers and fireballs that you could dream of within it, like the first sort of 40 minutes, and then it just escalates from there. But she can't take a hit and until you get to level 6 and you get Frost Nova, which is essentially like an area of effect attack that slows everyone down. And then you get there and you just spam that all the time until you hit level 10. And then it's like, oh man, there's so much that's just kind of sluggish about this. That obviously at the time it was revolutionary in the scale, the scope of it, and the way that you could move from world to world, and each world looked completely different, was full of completely different enemies. Was really exciting in a way that we just expect from games now. So with all that gone, I find it quite underwhelming. Though I will say that the itemization system is very nicely tuned in terms of it will happily just drop you your yellow item in the first 20 minutes if you're lucky, and that can just speed up the game about 5 times until you hit like level 10. Just because I was playing as a paladin and a ridiculous dagger dropped. And that has like a ridiculous, it's the same as the javelin poke animation actually, but it makes much more sense than the knife. It sort of like just pokes 20 times a minute, and skeletons and fallen shaman just sort of collapse in front of it as you just sort of mow your way around dungeons effortlessly. And it sort of reminded me of a lot of RPGs that have been re-released that have fast forward modes. And in fact, one of the best mods for Diablo 2 was, I think it's called Median XL, but I'll double check that. Essentially did just quadruple the speed of the game and make everything twice as ridiculous and twice as fast. And I think at that speed, it's more fun. So I have a feeling it's going to be something for purists only. Actually, I don't think it's a great advert for Diablo 4, which is, I think, is what they hope it will be. Because I think Diablo 4 will come out in a few years' time. So they're not going to release these close together because one might cannibalize the other. But I think people playing Diablo 2 might sort of be put off.
Oh wow!
And I wonder if there's, given the Diablo 4 is kind of going back to a lot of the kind of grim aesthetic of the second game, and promises in some ways to be a lot like that, a lot like Diablo 2. I wonder if it will struggle to attract new players. However, I think like 6 or 7 million people play Diablo 3, so I'm sure it will get its audience. But yeah, I was just surprised by it, to be honest. And I look forward to seeing what other action RPG fans think about it when it eventually releases.
Is it tied up in? Is it a completely untampered with release, other than the graphical upgrade, or does it try and tie it into a marketplace for the items or anything like that?
No, it's completely the same. It's all the maths and all of the itemization, the item drops, and the way items work and the leveling work and all the skills. All of the maths is the same as the original game. They haven't changed any of it. So it's truly it's just the graphical upgrade that you're looking at, which is very nicely done. Could have changed that javelin animation though.
I played Diablo 2 for the first time maybe a couple of years ago. I found it unexpectedly brutally hard.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's all about the build you have and
what drops as well. Basically, you're super vulnerable until level 6 for a lot of the character classes, and some of the character classes just aren't particularly good, unfortunately, especially at higher difficulty levels. So the druid, for example, is really fun and seems like one of the most fun characters because you can transform into a werewolf immediately. That's the first skill you can get if you want.
I think I was a druid, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can transfer. You can get further down the skill tree and become a bear if you want to be. Then it's also got an elemental skill tree, but if you want elemental skills, play sorceress. And then it's got like a buff skill tree, and in that case, just be a necromancer because high level necromancer buff skills are amazing, and their sort of debuff skills are amazing. So I don't know. There's some wonky balance in there. I think that obviously won't be fixed because everything is the same. And there's stuff like the assassin, which is the druid and the assassin are both expansion characters, I believe. So they're there to provide a bit of extra challenge for people who have already completed the game and are already very familiar with it. So if you pick those classes, you might be in for a difficult time. Really hard with the sorceress because her kind of pew spells take several hits to kill anything at the start, and you really have to. So it can be a slog unless you get a really good staff or something. So yeah, it's all that. It's a combination of RNG and class design and the way that it holds skills off until a bit too far, well, further than I think a modern gamer would expect. So yeah,
it sounds a bit similar to the way that because obviously the remake for Warcraft 3 came out a couple of years ago. That was a bit of a rough launch, wasn't it? But it sounds sort of it's in that area where there was a lot of talk about it, but actually it wasn't that significant in the end. You know, as a release for Blizzard and its general ethos.
Yeah, they actually they released the original version of Diablo II on Battle.net in the year 2000, I believe, because I bought it. So that's what I was using for a lot of the classes that weren't in the alpha to get skill information and stuff. And like it's almost like it's vanished from the store. I had to Google how to access my own game that I bought to actually get into it. But I don't quite see. I don't like the original graphics. Do have the original graphics are very characterful, and you can tell when you switch. You press F or G or something just to switch from the modern graphics to the old graphics, and the old graphics are just still full of personality. It's still like very atmospheric game. And I think it validates the fact there's just way too much plot in Diablo 3. It's like literally you just go up to a quest giver and then you can just click through their dialogue in a few seconds, and you don't have to wait around for doors to open or anything. You just go kill stuff. So hopefully Diablo 4 can learn from that a bit. So yeah. It's a nostalgia, eh?
But there's probably a value in. I mean, we're seeing a kind of age of a lot of re-releases at the moment, or kind of remakes of games of yesteryear. And I wonder if there is actually more value in just re-releasing something with perhaps a fairly superficial visual upgrade to it than there is in reappraising all of its parts, even if those parts aren't very good. Just as sort of like for the sake of record, a lot of these games of yesteryear are basically disappearing as the formats in which they were accessible also vanish. And maybe just for the sake of posterity, it's good to have these sort of refreshes that don't actually address any of the problems, because those problems are part of the historical record of those games.
Yeah, there've been some successful ones. Like I liked the Monkey Island remakes. They did, which obviously they did all the puzzles are the same and stuff, but they added optional hint systems, and they changed the art. But I think you could still see the original.
You could switch back into the old ones,
which is lovely. So I agree. I agree. Actually, it's a kind of way of preserving the history of gaming. There's definitely value to it, and also, or even if just patching stuff up to work on modern OS. So stuff. I think they re-released Grim Fandango. That was just a good re-release. You don't need to change that game very much. The bad puzzles are still going to be bad. There's no point going back and redesigning them. But the world is amazing. So and the voice acting and the music and the aesthetic of the Day of the Dead aesthetic is all still there, and it's still wonderful, and it is successfully preserved because of that. One day everything will live in the cloud.
Well, then nobody could make money off it if they weren't also re-releasing it fresh in some way. We in fact, one of the pieces of news that we thought about talking about this week, but it was so vaporous as to not really warrant any discussion, is that the Knights of the Old Republic is rumored to be being remade by Aspire Media currently. I don't have any strong feelings about that, because I don't have any strong feelings about the original game, but I wonder whether the best way to approach that is essentially a re-release of it rather than a remake.
Well, it's kind of already happened. Like a couple of years ago, I was playing through KOTOR on my iPad quite happily, because your touch controls work very perfectly well. It's pause combat with all the same graphics, and it's fine. I really enjoyed it as an RPG when I played it the first time through, probably like 12 years ago or whatever. I don't see what a remake would do for it, really, because it's a game with a lot of big corridors, and I don't know what they're really going to do to those corridors to meaningfully upgrade them.
Fill them with metahumans. That's what I need to do.
Yeah, maybe that's
Strangely symmetrical aliens.
It's the new speed tree.
But they wouldn't
Alex,
be able to put Adam Driver in it. So, as we've established, he's right out.
It's got to be in everything. That's true. That's just the new law of New law. Alex, you mentioned you playing something else.
Oh yeah, well you want nostalgia? You want old games?
Hit us.
I've been playing an old game. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about a game I've been playing on my Mister again, which is a kind of retro gaming emulation platform on which you can read a very long feature in the latest Edge magazine, written by myself. But I just want to talk about a game that I've called Mr. Do. I'm really tempted to call him Mr. Do, but it's Mr. Do, D-O, Mr. D-O with an exclamation mark on the end, which is it's kind of a bit obscure arcade game, and it came out in 1982. But I used to play it on my BBC like years ago. When I was a kid. I never played the original arcade version until my Mister, and it was an opportunity to go back to it because it's such a weird but incredibly fun game. And it turned out that my wife used to play the BBC version at her school when she was a kid as well. And she remembered exactly how to play it, and so we've been challenging each other on the high score table for it. But like, it's just this bananas design, which really doesn't make any sense. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because I just want to explore why on earth does this game work. So it's a game that looks like Dig Dug, in the sense that you're in this kind of dirt maze. So it's kind of, I suppose its sort of background would probably be Pac-Man, in the way that you're in Pac-Man, you're running around a maze. But in Dig Dug, you could make the maze tunnels yourself, and the enemies will, by and large, follow those tunnels, but they're able to tunnel themselves, and you're going out to hunt them down, and by filling them with air. And when you've filled all of the monsters with air and exploded them, you've finished the level. That's Dig Dug. Mr. Do, I understand, was literally an attempt to kind of follow Dig Dug's success. In this case, the theming, the Dig Dug is weird, like you're underground and those are weird things you're filling with air. Mr. Do is downright bananas, where you are a clown, you have a magic ball that you can throw around the level, and you are being hunted by dinosaurs. Also, you're collecting fruit, and there are apples as well that are affected by gravity and will crush stuff. That's the basics of it. So there are several ways to finish a level. You can finish a level if you defeat all the enemies. The enemies all emerge somewhat like Pac-Man from the middle of the screen. They kind of just spawn one after the other from this kind of central point. You can finish the level by defeating all of them. You can also finish the level by eating all of the fruit, which are in these 8, so 2 by 2, so 8 in total, sort of groups around the screen. One of the nice features about the game is that when you collect them, it starts to play a note, and which increases in pitch with every successive piece of fruit, as long as you collect them fast enough. So you've got to basically just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that is just automatically rewarding whenever you get that, because it takes a little bit of skill, because you can easily just overshoot the kind of the cell that you're fundamentally in, so that you don't collect the next bit of fruit. So when you get that, and when you collect all 8 in a single go, you get an extra 500 point score bonus. So that's just really nice as well. So you get all the fruit, all the monsters. Also, sometimes, very rarely, when you smash an apple by making it drop more than sort of 2 squares, because fundamentally it's on a grid but you have free movement, but it's basically everything's arrayed on a grid. When it falls more than 2 squares, you might be lucky and you might get a star drop, and if you collect the star you will win. So there's that. What you do, like, do you kill stuff, do you get fruit? Who knows? Just play. Then sometimes a letter that's one of the letters of the word extra appears from the top of the screen and wanders around. It can also be defeated. When you defeat it, it turns into some fruit. Who knows? Like an apple. Who knows why? I don't know. When all of the monsters, I'm sorry, none of this is going to make any sense to you. I'm just trying to illustrate that this game's design is just this complete hodgepodge of ideas. Like, it's just been bolted on to each other, none of which make any sense. So once all the enemies have come out of the central spawn point, the spawn point turns into a what is it? It's a cake. I think it's a piece of cake. You can eat the cake. It freezes all of the monsters on screen. If a letter was already out of the letter spawned 3 blue monsters, which sort of go around the screen. The music changes, everything goes red. But now you're being hunted by the letter and these extra blue monsters. If you defeat the letter at that point, and if the letter isn't out at that point, it just comes out at the top of the screen. Same thing happens. If you defeat the letter from that point, you will you'll go back to the normal mode. The kind of importance to that is that if you can defeat all of the letters that spell out extra, you'll finish the level and you'll get an extra life. I think those are all the rules. They don't make sense, but you have this constant sense of, what should I do? I know I can do this. And most of a lot of the arcade games from that time really directed, like, there was one thing you should do, and you should do that well. Pac-Man is a very, you know exactly what you're doing. You're eating all of the dots, and you can maximize your score by very specifically going after the ghosts. Space invaders, asteroids, all of these things are very directed. This one, absolutely bananas. Like, you can do what and it's very freeform. Like, the way that the AI works for the monsters is, they hunt you down. They will come after you, and sometimes they'll run away. There's this real sense of sort of, you don't know what they're going to do. It's chaotic, and you're always responding. Like, I've seen people who are really good at it, and they are playing in a very specific way. I'm sure there are specific routes you could take with it. At my level, I'm just responding to an ever-evolving, strange situation. I could go for that last piece of fruit, and or I could kill the last thing. You're bouncing this kind of magic ball around, and it's sort of hitting stuff at right angles, it's 90-degree angles, and it's just bouncing around this maze that you've dug for yourself. That's sort of another sense of chaos to this game, where, and then, you can't shoot it. You've only got one of these balls that you can have at one time. So once you've sent it off bouncing around and it's missed whatever you intended to hit, and it's just aimlessly bouncing around without doing anything useful, you haven't got anything else to shoot with. So, if you're being chased, you don't have anything to deal with stuff with, and get more chaos. It's so good. It's just so fun. It's so that freeformness is odd for its time, but it for now it does seem like it feels really fresh. I've also been playing its Super Nintendo version. It was released on Super Nintendo at some point, and in that version you can play this faithful recreation of the original arcade game. Although the arcade game is better still, but it also has a battle mode, and in that mode, you play 2-player. You're both playing on the map at the same time, and it is this cooperative, competitive thing where you're vying for score. If you can't hurt each other, but if you throw the ball, it's just my wife is so incredibly annoying in this game. In this case, you both have your magic balls, but only one of you can throw it at a time. So if your opponent has thrown the ball, suddenly you can't throw your ball. There's one ball. There's one. You've instantiated the single ball of the universe, the quantum ball, and it will stun you if it hits you, and it will defeat enemies as it normally would. She always stuns me at the start of every level, and she always just hogs the ball. She hogs the Mr. Do ball, and it's really annoying. And she's really good at it, and she's much better at it than I am. But like, it's a really good game for that, because it has this sort of, that perfect kind of cooperative, competitive feel to it, where you do have to work together to survive, because it does pump up the number of enemies and their speed and things. So you are under pressure much earlier on in the battle mode in the Super Nintendo version. But so you're together, and if you can work together, you can probably maximize a really big score. But at the same time, you can really screw over your opponent if you throw the ball at them and not the enemy, which you probably should do. And that's just a good feel for a game like that. Mr. Do, it's fucking great.
Never trust clowns.
Or my wife.
Or clown wives. Yeah, don't trust the clown wife.
That's a Decemberist song.
Yeah, I've never heard of this, but I looked it up after you were talking about it the other day, and I'm a big fan of Dig Dug and Pac-Man, and obviously this is a sort of blend of the two. But like you say, it's really clever that it's so freeform that it offers you not just lots of strategies by which to maximize your score, but also lots of ways in which you could just simply end that level and move on. Yeah. And you're right that there weren't that many games of that era in which ending the level and maximizing your score weren't in some way more kind of connected. Whereas in this, it is very much like it's easy to play but hard to master kind of game, where you could progress through levels reasonably quickly if you didn't care about really maximizing score. And there were lots of different ways you do it. So you can actually chop and change your strategy. If something looks less viable halfway through a level than you had previously hoped, then you can just change your strategy and exit that level by some other means.
Yeah, and you're also thinking about loads of stuff. So the a really good way of getting a big score is to crush lots of enemies with falling apples. And in the first level, so the levels are each there's kind of like 9 levels, and then it loops. And you know which level you're on because when you start the level, there's an existing tunnel that is the numeral for that level. So the 1 has this central shaft running down the center, and there's always an apple towards the top, and you can push that apple, or you can push stuff. It has this weird, like early physics stuff. You can push the apple, and it will fall, and that happens to go past the spawn point. If you time it right, you can get these massive bonuses because you've pushed the apple onto the enemies. That's quite apart from collecting all but one of the fruits and defeating all the enemies and going for the letter. It's a nice brain fizzy game where you go at the start, it's sort of like, what on earth am I meant to be doing? And then you start seeing sort of possibilities and stuff. And
I think there were a lot of kind of like second tier games which were released in the wake of a more kind of iconic game, but were actually themselves probably more interesting. And maybe not doing anything that kind of intentional in the way that they mashed up ideas from other games, but still produced something more exciting than the original in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it doesn't feel intentional at all. It feels like a load of accidents. It feels like a bit of sort of hallucinogenic drugs were also taken during the video as well, but couldn't possibly say.
You say that for a lot of games of that era. It was normally just sort of like Animal plus corporate sponsor plus Dig Dug in this case, it seems. Let's think about Zool and Chupa Chups.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
Fond memories.
Cool Spot. Who can forget Cool Spot?
Yeah.
Fucking Cool Spot.
Yeah, Cool Spot. Oh, my God. Marsh, save us from this nostalgia trap.
Yeah. Take us to the future, Marsh.
Very well. You may regret coming to the future with me, because the future is awful. I have to tell you. I mean, I've been. I'm sorry to say, I've been in like a bit of a gaming funk recently, and I've not really had a lot of time. I've not been in a good headspace for games, so I sort of wanted to play things that I can slip into really easily, maybe in like short bursts. I don't really want to learn anything. Like generally, but also in this specific instance about games. So I don't want anything like with systemic. I don't want to play a card game where I actually have to think. I want something familiar that I know how to deal with. But everything I've tried, I've just sort of like got really furious with and uninstalled after about 20 minutes. And in general, I don't think I've been infuriated in a like an edifying podcastable way. I've just been I've just been an asshole about it. But I did play and also got angry with and deleted Genesis Noir, to which I say Genesis No Tar, as in no thank you. Right? It's like no thanks to. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a point and click game, and it has the trappings of the film noir genre, which are projected very stylishly onto a retelling of the birth of the universe. So the Big Bang, for example, deep sigh, correct. The Big Bang, for example, is a gunshot. What does a murder? And you appear to be the embodiment of time in some way, but obviously you are also like look a bit like a hard-bitten sleuth from a film noir, and you have a wide fedora. Well, I'm not sure if it's a fedora. It could be a Homburg, actually. It's hard to tell. And it's hard to tell because the game has this really beautiful art style, this line art, which has these kind of rangy, elastic-looking characters who are constructed out of these kind of lovely, beautiful, simple shapes. And that's why I was really excited to play it, because it's just this super gorgeous to look at, and the animation in it is just a fucking masterclass. Unfortunately, its art style did instantly induce a migraine, because it has this slowly flickering grainy texture to the background. The position of like this grain changes not fast, like every maybe half a second to a second, which turns out to be way worse than it changing fast. And you can reduce the flickering because it changes kind of like the luminosity of it as well. And it says at the start of the game that this can induce seizures, which I fucking believe. And you can turn it off, but you can't get rid of the shifting grain texture for some reason. And that combined with the really high contrast black and white line art, so the lines are like this glowing white on a black background. It's quite a strain to look at. I imagine it's much easier to take on a TV screen than a monitor, but 5 minutes and my head was throbbing. But it does look amazing. So I was willing to suffer for that. But then every interaction, it's just really aggravating. Like, I don't know.
What style of a game is it? What genre?
It is a point and click. But it's sort of, well, I mean, it's not a point and. I mean, it should really be an animation, and because the point and clicks can be arbitrary anyway. But when the story is kind of this abstract, it's really hard to set expectations for what is interactive and how you're meant to advance what's going on screen. And a lot of times you're just sort of clicking things and then wiggling your mouse, and then an action you couldn't possibly have intuited would occur. So it's like point and click, but you're just trying to click and randomly almost in order to get the animation to continue, rather than combining X with X, that kind of point and click game. And so but on top of that, sort of like just what do you want me to do? Exasperation. The actual physicality of the interaction is really poor on the mouse and keyboard. There's this part super early on after you've witnessed this murder, which begins the universe. And you end up in this void-like space full of light beams and dark energy beams. And you need to throw down seeds to absorb some of these beams, thus making the area traversable. And the seeds thing, there's sort of like this little growth sequence that you need to encourage. And each seed you plant has a sort of different interaction where you grow a different plant. I don't know what the plant is a metaphor for. But then this one where you need to sort of like cycle through day and night really rapidly by rotating the sky. But the interaction for that, even though you're sort of like rotating in a circular motion, the interaction for that is to scrub back and forward and back with your mouse really quickly and a long way. And it's really, I mean, it's like you might actually damage your mouse by doing it to the vigorousness that is required. And just like every interaction is pretty much that abstract and that make-worky and awkward and unknowable. and like all pinned to this metaphor that I just quickly realized it wasn't gonna carry me through. Like, I mean, you did the big sigh at the beginning when you heard, and I too am skeptical that film noir is the right language to talk about the birth of the universe. But I was willing to see how it connected those things up. Like if it was just an animation, I would probably sit there and think that it was playful, if not like elucidating. But the cost for this was too high. It was too high. And then I deleted it and had to lie down in a dark room for a few hours. So yeah,
that's a shame. The developers, what have they? Have they made other games?
I was not familiar with them. I think they come from a variety of different media backgrounds. They are Feral Cat Den, I believe, is the name of the studio.
Okay. What is it about? I'm left usually fairly cold by noir as a thing. I know that there are some great things that are written within it, but made within it. But I am generally, it's not something that ever attracts me as a story genre. What is its pull? Are you into this? Are you into noir?
Yes. I mean, to a degree, I wouldn't say I was into it, but I have enjoyed a lot of noir things. Chinatown is one of my favorite movies. I even watched The Two Jakes recently, which is a sequel to Chinatown, which was actually also quite good. Directed by Jack Nicholson himself, supposedly.
Good Lord.
Which was better than I expected. And I'm a big fan of like a lot of the things that earnestly approach noir. I'm not a fan of things that spoof noir because I don't tend to think there's much that can be said about that. There's much in the spoofery which is interesting to me. Like you can ape this stuff, and it's very easy to ape, but and pastiche. But what does that do? You're just essentially echoing something rather than creating something new or saying something about the original. But I like the Easy Rawlins books I think are really good, and I think they do something by talking about the black experience at the time that a lot of the kind of or at least in the manner of a lot of the noir stories that hitherto had white heroes, and that's interesting to me. So they're interesting. It is an interesting time in America, I think.
Yeah,
to discuss. I mean, you did a crime fiction course at the same university I did, right, Tom?
I did.
Did you get deep into the noir world?
I didn't like particularly fixate on it. It didn't really capture me, because I'd already encountered all of the tropes in things that were busy spoofing it. And actually, oddly, a lot of the stuff that appears, a lot of the kind of the hard-boiled detective stuff that appears in noir has ended up in stuff like Frank Miller's Sin City series and that kind of thing, and it's become sort of balloon animal versions of the original, original ideas behind the characters, and almost like a celebration of flawed, hard drinking detectives who are bad for themselves and everyone around them.
It's strange, isn't it? They've become so archetypal that there has been a sort of acceptance of them, and I don't think that was really the tone in which those original novels were written, like The Big Sleep, and so
that's
forth.
interesting.
I mean, those were flawed characters, and they were written to be flawed, and for the reader to find them flawed and objectionable, and somehow they've just sort of schlubbed on into the
cool detective is basically what it's become.
Yeah, they've gone through a pop culture filter and come out the other end as being
decadent,
glamorous,
really.
And quite. So I think it's a kind of genre that's been compromised. Though I do enjoy a lot of the stylistic qualities of film noir, as shown in like The Third Man. I think it's just like it's a beautiful thing to watch, even if it doesn't like adhere to a lot of the kind of noir tropes in the same way.
Oh God, that soundtrack though. I know this is sacrilegious, but fucking hell, the soundtrack to The Third Man, it's just fucking insane. It sounds like something like a 1960s porny comedy caper.
Yeah.
Does it? I can't remember. I haven't seen it for a long time.
Orson Welles kind of like in the shadow of a doorway, and his face emerges, and it sort of goes.
Okay, it's the zither one, right?
Yeah, it's the zither one. Yeah. Mega zither. In fact, apparently the origin story for that is that everybody is getting pissed up in a bar in Vienna, and this guy just in a cabaret or something, and this guy was on stage playing, and they're like, "Let's get him for the film." And you can tell that's. I mean, yes, that is how that decision was made. It was not a good one. You didn't think hard enough about it.
I think a lot of it was. Is it that a lot of it was filmed in Prague before it had been kind of repaired? So a lot of the kind of going through rubble into underground chase sequences and stuff was filmed. It's like you couldn't film that now because it's all been fixed. But it's remarkable. Yeah, it's remarkable for that stuff, and also they look like ants from here speech.
Yeah, it does. And it's an amazing looking film as well. Christ, it's one of the most beautiful films. Sure.
As far as I've learned, like a lot of the lighting for film noir in that era was because they literally couldn't afford that many lights. So what you'd have is like two very bright lights, and hence this kind of very intense light and dark the use of intense shadows, because like they couldn't light everything from as many angles because it would cost too much and involve a lot of wiring. So that's an example of working around limitations, actually creating a visual style of its own.
Orson Welles does spend about a third of the film running through a sewer, though. Is that the first sewer level which outstays its welcome in Western fiction?
I think they were so pleased with the sort of the bending of the silhouettes on those curved walls as they run around that they must have fallen in love with that shot so much that it goes on for a bit. It's a bit much, isn't it? Great film, though.
Yeah, fantastic.
For all of that. And before we move on to questions, there's some news hot off the press.
Oh, God.
That I wanted to bring to both of you. This is courtesy of Eurogamer, and I've had to sort of have a refresh to check and a reread to check that it isn't a joke. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the link to the story in the chat here. The headline...
God. I did see this earlier on, though I totally forgot about it.
Assassin's Creed Mr. Men and Little Miss Books revealed. And the one thing I'd like to do, if we could just for a minute, is if we go to the image 2/3 down, there's a picture of Mr. Ezio, and I'd like to solicit your reactions to it. I know that it's an audio medium, but I'll describe it briefly. It's something you could not make him. You could not make him in Epic's Face Maker tool. Because he's about 40% nose. He's wearing a belt and boots and no trousers.
No,
The hidden blade is not evident, so it is hidden, I suppose.
Well, he's got the kind of arm
he's got a strap on his
right. It's going to be that's going to be in there. It would be facing.
He's only got 4 fingers on each hand. Both of his hands have only got 4 fingers.
That's true. He could have 2 hidden blades. Also, he looks like the sort of person that you see streaking across a football field with his bum out.
Yeah. Anorak over their heads. Dick flapping in the wind.
That's right. It's hard to imagine him air assassinating an ocelot in that state of garb. But
the first thing I thought when I saw that cover is that I felt this pathetic need to just apologize to Roger Hargreaves. I was like, I'm so sorry. He's probably, I don't know. Is he okay? Roger Hargreaves? He must have died. But anyway, I just want to apologize to him.
I hope so, for his sake.
Yeah, it says that it's by Adam Hargreaves, so a member of the family of some kind.
Oh yeah, he's long dead.
Have you seen on to the side? There's a Mr. Leonardo.
Oh yes, there's a
Mr. One out of Valhalla and a Mr. One out of the Greek one.
Cassandra. Is it Cassandra? Yeah. It's hard to tell, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, everyone should look at this and be cursed.
Although, are they going to canonically determine the genders of the Viking and Greek one?
To me, the Viking looks like female Eivor, but apparently they're called the Little Miss series.
Yeah.
And so I was playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla the other day, and I was fighting a man in full plate armor, waving his standard around, and I countered him. I took his standard off him, and then I rammed it through his chest plate so hard that he was stuck leaning backwards, dying, and slowly sliding down it as blood spurted out of his chest. And now there's a little Miss Abel book coming out. Children.
I mean, you do remember that's nothing compared to what happens in Mr. Angry. Is this a thing? Is this what?
It can't be real, right?
I mean, as in, is this like what the Mr. Man books sort of do to kind of extend their, extend themselves into the future, or is it's Ubisoft and its classic, its constant sense of finding new media to work in. Oh, we're doing blockchain. Oh, we're doing game streaming. Oh, we're doing Mr. Men books. Like is it that?
Each sold as an NFT.
Oh God!
Oh God! You just scraped the very bottom of the modern barrel.
Oh, it's so plausible, though. It's so plausible they'd do that. I had a horrible idea for an NFT, which I'll tell you guys about in the break.
Just in case, by saying it publicly, it becomes true.
Yeah.
Should we do questions and questions?
Let's do it.
We have a question from Tom, and he says, "Dear algorithmically generated crowbar, in your last episode you talked about how a Witcher 3 mod poured all of Geralt's existing dialogue into an AI in order to create new dialogue. My question is, if every member of the Crate and Crowbar had all their hot takes from each podcast poured into an AI, which AI-generated member of the pod do you think would be the most likely to pass a CNC Turing test, aka going through an entire pod without any of the human podders noticing? Thanks for the tasty pods, Tom."
It's hard because I think we've all become sort of pale shells of anything that we started out with, doomed ever to repeat the same patterns of crap.
I think after the last year, even a pretty bog standard AI would probably do a better impression of a human being than I currently do. So it's
I was concerned for a moment when Alex was describing Mr. Doe that did seem to be like a random series of statements that an AI might string together.
This isn't a game. What the hell?
What's happening? He's malfunctioned.
Well, here's the thing, right? I think it's not so much about necessarily the content of what people say, but you want a podder with the most kind of dynamic range of honking, so that you can better assemble a variety of different sounds, right?
Or would it be the other way around? Wouldn't an AI based on someone with a kind of a low dynamic range of topics, or a very identifiable pattern of topics, wouldn't that be the one that...
I see. That was... Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I was thinking that you would want to use the AI to say things that you'd want them to say, but actually, if the purpose is just to pass the...
It's the Turing test.
So you want the podcaster with the most boring voice, basically, who says the fewest interesting things.
But it's not about interest. It's who always talks about the same old crap. And it's me talking about old games because I'm the old man of our...
That's not true, Alex.
Comedy.
You're often very boring about
troupe.
Destiny as well. I'm kidding.
Well, right.
Here it comes. The Hunt criticism.
Your AI, you just go on about Hunt and then be miserable about all the other games. There.
It's a fair cop.
If game equals Hunt 1, if game not Hunt 2. That's how binary works. Fuck.
The Tom Francis AI, that would talk about card games. Roguelikes, of which there are so many of them now that you'd be totally credible that for an AI just to come up with random collection of words and for that to be a credible card-based roguelike.
Could an AI string together a Tom Francis anecdote about how he breaks game though? With the AI break itself.
Train it on PC Gamer diary entries.
Yeah, good job.
In fact, the more you've written online, the more easily. So Tom Senior, I think you probably have the most articles to your name of all of us,
I've
maybe put together.
Literally thousands of news posts.
I'm afraid you are the most AI'd person.
I'm the most AI. Just feed me into the machine, spit me out into the side.
There's no need for your meat anymore.
That's right.
I think we'd be in with a good shout of recreating your nose as well in Metahuman. I think you're handsome enough to pass the Metahuman test.
You know what? That's the nicest thing anyone said to me for a year.
Oh. Tom, you're almost symmetrical enough that a fake version of you could be produced.
That's all I desire. Yeah, well, none of us is that close to golden ratio.
No.
But you're right. I think the sheer amount of word data I've put on the internet that an AI could hoover up for.
But then again, you've written kind of news stories which could be about anything.
Yeah.
Your taste in games is very eclectic as well. So it's going to be difficult for it to find patterns. And then so there's Chris as well. I think that if the robot just started talking about a Star Wars game and specifically on his story, I would be totally, this is obviously Chris.
Sort of just if a Wikipedia entry was being spoken in the voice of Chris, do you think that would perhaps pass? Not for a full pod though. Like.
I don't know.
That's Rich McCormick as well.
I mean, that's just the Star Wars word salad, isn't it? It's doing most of the heavy lifting there. I saw a good tweet the other day by somebody called Gom Jabbar, who says every time a new Star Wars movie or show is announced, all the fans are like, "OMG, Glup Shito is back!" Cry face, cry face, cry face. And even better, I saw this because Jim Unwin, who's a very nice man and an artist who previously worked at Media Molecule, amongst other things, has actually drawn Glup Shito, and it is a spectacular character design. I really want to know what Glup Shito's backstory is. I'm so invested in Glup Shito.
I want the Mr. Glut Shito book that illustrates in that style.
I think the one member of us, I think that the AI wouldn't be able to do would be Pip, because AI just isn't very good at invention, and you never know what Pip's going to say. So
it's true.
That's very true.
The rest of us are totally replaceable.
It was missing Pip on the pod. I think Pip and Chris did a nice Valheim special, didn't they, a few weeks back?
Yeah.
It was lovely. Nice chat about a lovely game.
It's not a lovely game. It's not a lovely game at all.
No, is it not?
At the moment, my one ship and all of my good stuff got broken up by a stupid skeleton, and I'm really, really angry about it, and I haven't gone back to it since. It's on the other side of the world. I went on a voyage. I stopped. I was traveling for so far, and the wind was against me, and I just sort of was pushing forward or whatever it is, and sort of was looking out the window or something, and looked back to see that I was steering towards a small island on which it was in the swamp biome. There was some of those dreadful slimes and skeletons. And the Draugr, and they were shooting arrows at me. Destroyed my ship, lost all my ship, spawned back at my base on the other side of the world. I constructed, with the remainder of my stuff, another ship, took the rest of my stuff up with me, as supplies to sort it out. And I took down a portal nearby, because I was going to reestablish a base. I thought it's going to be easy to get my stuff. It's right. I could just jump out of the ship, straight back on the ship, no problem. I lost it all again. Everything is lost, and I rage quit, and and I haven't been back since.
Why did you go to the bad place?
Because that was the next place I've got to go. I had to go to the bad place. I should have just made a nice house.
Yeah. That's what the game's about, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Why didn't I just make a nice house? And that it's a metaphor for capitalism. So,
Where do slimes come from? I mean, I don't mean that in a mummy slime meets a daddy slime kind of thing, but I mean they appear to be now ubiquitous.
It's D&D.
Is it from D? Is it
I
from
think it must
D&D
be.
originally? But where surely do they go further
Gelatinous
back than
cube. Don't know.
Because I mean,
but the D&D incarnation is the gelatinous cube.
But it's Dragon Quest that really solidified them as the little teardrop shaped blobs, right?
Yeah.
And she slimes.
But do they have like a mythic heritage in the same way that
Well, you're the one who knows about Arthurian myth.
Yeah, but
are there any in there?
I don't think so. Like elves,
Gawain and the green
and dwarves
slime
and shit. I mean, they go back a bit, but the slime just appears to suddenly appear in video games.
I mean, they are shit though. You're like, what if there was a monster and it is all sticky and you can see through it? I mean, what?
No, there's the Dark Souls ones are horrible because they drop on you from the ceiling and sort of suck on you for a bit before melting at your feet, and it's horrible. My main association with slimes is actually using school computers to play those really crappy online flash games like Slime Tennis, because the slime is the easiest 2D thing you can draw that isn't a square. So Slime Tennis is about jumping around as little slimes in 2D, bouncing a ball over a net. That's it.
I don't remember that.
Adorable.
Well, take that AI. I bet you didn't think that a discussion about AI would end up talking about slimes
or tennis
and the history of them.
They are rubbish, though. Whenever I say, "Oh, it's a slime," I've been playing loads of Persona 5, and the shadows, you bump into them, and they turn into a mob. And if it's a mob of 5 slimes, I'm just like, "Oh, fuck's sake!" Could you not design something else? There's so many inventive designs in that game for monsters. It's like, slimes need to die.
I suppose the divisibleness of slimes is their USP, right?
Yeah. But that's kind of an annoying one, though.
Yeah,
it's really annoying.
You never think, "Oh, good, time to fight a slime."
I prefer them to scuttling enemies, like the small scuttling enemies that run towards you very fast. They're my least favorite enemy to fight. The ones that you end up shooting around your feet to defeat.
Oh yeah, those are rubbish. Did we answer that question? What was the question?
Yeah,
no, yes,
we definitely
more or less got there. We got there.
Jan writes, "Dear Creating Crowbar, I just heard this question on another podcast, the Empire Film Podcast, if you want to know. I immediately thought of you guys. The question was centered around movie characters, so there's no risk of repetition. So, without further ado, what video game character needs a hug the most? Cheers, Jan."
Well, yeah, as I was talking about in the last pod, I think that the character in your character in Disco Elysium needs a hug, but I would like to give a hug to brain's gone completely blank.
Kim?
My sidekick, Kim.
Yeah. Oh, Kim Kitsuragi.
Yeah, he's a lovely man.
He's the best.
I thought they nailed the voice acting on him in the update.
Yeah, absolutely glorious.
Just the right level of patience, strained patience in his voice. It's really good. Yeah, Kim deserves it more. I'd agree with that.
Who'd give a good hug? I reckon the Bloody Baron would give a good hug.
Oh yeah,
it might be a bit whiffy, but
yeah,
it's a stench of booze.
Oh yeah, there'd be little bits of food
horrible.
in his beard.
You'd have bits of there'd definitely be bits of food.
But it would be a warm, nurturing embrace.
It would be like warm, but also like inhaling a roast dinner at the same time.
Isn't he a bit psychotic? He might hug you and then kind of.
Well, he's called the Bloody Baron, Alex.
Make you dance and then kill you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's just his rough northern charm, isn't it?
That's what they're all like.
Any?
What about slimes? Would you hug a slime?
Hug a slime, yeah.
You wouldn't hug a slime. In that, you wouldn't download a car font.
The government getting worried. Don't encourage those slimes.
Hugging slimes funds terrorism. I was trying to think of villains that need hugs already, but like they're often so arrogant that you'd be debasing yourself by hugging them. Like, would you hug Sephiroth? No.
He's so full of himself.
Exactly. It's like,
but maybe that's it. Maybe he needs the hug more than most because it's all filling in for his sort of the void within. He just needs to know he doesn't need to do all this playing around.
I'd hug an Ifrit. Hug an
Ifrit.
Hug an Ifrit. It'll be your final act. But
what about Dutch van der Linde? Could you hug the bad out of him? Could you turn him around, put him back on the right tracks?
Nah.
I think he's.
I was just trying to go through the cast and think, who else is there? Well, who's that? The sort of like the kind of idiot, kind of violent one in the group. That group that you hate from the start. You have to bust him out of prison.
Oh yeah, the guy with the handlebar moustache. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, he might need a hug.
I'm going with the goose out of Untitled Goose Game.
Peck your eyes out.
Mr. Ezio?
Mr. Ezio needs a hug. And some trousers.
Yeah. You don't want to get caught in his hidden blade, do you?
First the trousers, then the hug. Not the other way around. Thank you, Monsieur Ezio. Monsignor Ezio. Is that it? Italian?
Yeah, you've nailed it.
Thanks, mate.
Those are all the questions that we had time for this week.
Thank you.
Please send us more questions.
Yeah, you can send us more questions at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You could tweet us at Crate and Crowbar. You can watch this as a video on YouTube, where you can find other videos by us. The address for that is youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar. Thanks to our Patreon backers. You can back us too at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar, or you can simply join our lovely Discord community, the link for which is on our website, crateandcrowbar.com. That's it. I've stolen the outro from Tom.
You have.
I don't mind that. It's all good.
Sorry.
I've been Tom Senior. I was wrong earlier about saying that the third one was filmed in Prague. It was Vienna.
Of course.
So I thought I'd, before we got the emails about that, nipping that in the bud. I've been high on Tango for this entire... If you said a certain energy, that's where it's coming from.
That certain Tango energy.
Definitely not an AI. Couldn't be reproduced with an AI. I've been Marsh Davis.
I've been Alex Wiltshire.
Thanks for listening, everybody.